The morning sun had barely touched the horizon when Lady Clarissa Pemberton felt the cold water hit her face. She gasped and stumbled backward, her nightgown soaked through. Her stepsister Margaret stood above her, holding the empty pitcher with a cruel smile. "Get up, you lazy creature," Margaret hissed. "Mother wants the breakfast room prepared before the guests arrive. And do something about your appearance. You look like a drowned rat." Clarissa wiped the water from her eyes. Her hands trembled, but she kept her voice steady. "I shall attend to it at once." Margaret swept from the room, her silk dressing gown rustling with importance. Clarissa remained on the floor for a moment longer. The cold water dripped down her neck and pooled around her knees. She had lived in this house for 25 years, but it had never felt like home. Not since her father died when she was 7 years old. She pushed herself up slowly. Her reflection in the small mirror showed exactly what Margaret had described. Wet brown hair hung in tangles around her face. Her grey eyes looked too large in her thin face. She had been told countless times that she was plain, unmarriageable, a burden her stepmother tolerated only because her father's will required it. Clarissa dried herself with a rough towel and dressed quickly. The morning air was cold in her small room at the back of the manor. Her stepsisters had the warm chambers that faced the garden. She had this narrow space that once housed a lady's maid. The walls were bare, except for a single painting her father had given her. It showed a meadow full of wild flowers, bright and free. She hurried downstairs to the breakfast room. The servants were already working, but they stepped aside when they saw her. Mrs. Holloway, the housekeeper, gave her a sympathetic look, but said nothing. Everyone knew Clarissa's position in this house. She was neither family nor servant. She existed in a strange place between both worlds. "Make sure every glass shines," her stepmother's voice cut through the quiet morning. Lady Pemberton stood in the doorway, her elegant figure draped in a morning dress of deep blue. "The Duke of Thornbury arrives today. If anything is amiss, you shall go without supper for a week." Clarissa curtsied. "Yes, stepmother, and stay out of sight when he comes. I will not have you frightening away such an important guest with that dreary face of yours." The words stung, as they always did. Clarissa had learned long ago not to show her pain. She simply nodded and returned to polishing the silverware. Her stepmother swept away, already calling instructions to Margaret and her other daughter, Felicity. The Duke of Thornbury was coming to consider one of her stepsisters for marriage. The entire household had been in chaos for weeks preparing for his visit. He was said to be tremendously wealthy, with estates across England. He was also said to be cold, distant, a man who had shut himself away from society for nearly a decade after some tragedy no one spoke of openly. Clarissa wondered what kind of man would emerge from such isolation. She imagined someone harsh and unfeeling, someone who would look at her the way her stepfamily did, with contempt and dismissal. She pushed the thought away and focused on her work. The morning passed in a blur of preparation. By noon, everything gleamed. The breakfast room looked perfect, ready to impress a duke. Clarissa's back ached from bending over tables and reaching high shelves. Her hands were red and raw from cleaning solutions. "Go to your room," her stepmother commanded when she inspected the work. "And do not come out until I send for you, which I will not." Clarissa obeyed. She climbed the narrow servants' stairs to her small chamber and closed the door. Through her tiny window she could see the front drive. She told herself she would not watch for the Duke's arrival, but as the afternoon light began to fade, she found herself looking out anyway. A black carriage appeared on the road. It was magnificent, pulled by 4 matched horses. The crest on the door caught the sunlight. Her heart beat faster, though she could not say why. This man meant nothing to her. He would marry one of her stepsisters and leave. Her life would continue exactly as it had before. The carriage stopped before the manor. A footman rushed to open the door. A man stepped out, and even from this distance, Clarissa could see he was tall. He wore black, as though still in mourning. His movements were precise and controlled. When he turned slightly, she glimpsed his profile, strong features, dark hair, an expression of complete detachment. He looked up suddenly, and for just a moment his gaze seemed to land on her window. Clarissa stepped back quickly, her cheeks burning. How foolish to be caught staring like a curious child. She moved away from the window and sat on her narrow bed. Hours passed. She heard the sounds of dinner below. Laughter and conversation drifted up through the floors. Her stomach growled with hunger, but she was used to that. She had a small piece of bread hidden in her drawer from yesterday. She ate it slowly, making it last. Night fell. The house grew quiet. Clarissa changed into her nightgown and tried to sleep, but her mind would not rest. She kept thinking of the Duke's face, the way he had looked so alone, even surrounded by servants and finery. She wondered if he felt as trapped as she did, just in a different kind of prison. She finally drifted off near midnight, unaware that her life was about to change in ways she could never imagine. The next morning brought chaos. Clarissa woke to shouting in the hallway. She dressed quickly and cracked open her door. Her stepmother was speaking in urgent, hushed tones with Margaret. "It is impossible," Margaret was saying. "He cannot be serious." "Lower your voice," her stepmother snapped. "I do not understand it either, but the Duke has made his choice. We must accept it." "But mother, she is nothing. She has no dowry, no beauty, no accomplishments. Why would he choose her over us?" Clarissa's breath caught. Surely they could not mean her. But a cold dread settled in her stomach. Her stepmother's next words confirmed her fear. "He specifically asked for Clarissa. He wishes to speak with her this morning. I cannot fathom what game he is playing, but we must comply. A duke is a duke, even one as strange as Thornbury." Clarissa's hands shook as she closed the door. The Duke of Thornbury wanted to speak with her. It made no sense. She had not even been presented to him. She had followed instructions and stayed hidden in her room. How did he even know she existed? A knock came at her door. Mrs. Holloway entered, her round face creased with worry. "Miss Clarissa, you are wanted in the drawing room. His Grace the Duke of Thornbury requests your presence." "I do not understand," Clarissa whispered. "Nor do I, dear. But you must go. Here, let me help you look presentable." The housekeeper brushed Clarissa's hair and pinned it into a simple style. She straightened Clarissa's plain grey dress and stood back. "You look as lovely as you can in these old things. Your father would be ashamed to see how they dress you." Clarissa squeezed the woman's hand. Mrs. Holloway had been kind to her since childhood. She was one of the few bright spots in this dark house. The walk to the drawing room felt like walking to an execution. Her stepmother waited outside the door, her face tight with anger. "Whatever you do in there, do not embarrass this family. Speak only when spoken to, and for heaven's sake, try not to look quite so pathetic." Clarissa nodded. Her stepmother opened the door and announced her. "Miss Clarissa Pemberton, Your Grace." The room was bright with morning sun. It made Clarissa blink as she entered. The Duke of Thornbury stood by the window, his back to her. He was even taller than she had thought, his shoulders broad beneath his perfectly tailored coat. When he turned, she got her first clear look at his face. He was handsome, but in a harsh way. Sharp cheekbones and a strong jaw. His eyes were a startling blue, like ice, but there were shadows under them, and lines of strain around his mouth. This was a man who had suffered. She recognized that look because she saw it in her own mirror every day. "Miss Pemberton," he said. His voice was deep and smooth. "Please sit." She sat on the edge of a chair, her hands clasped in her lap. He studied her for a long moment, and she felt exposed under that penetrating gaze. She wanted to look away, but forced herself to meet his eyes. Whatever this was about, she would face it with what dignity she had left. "I will not waste your time with pleasantries," he said finally. "I have a proposition for you, one that may sound strange, but I assure you I am quite serious." "I am listening, Your Grace," she managed to say. "I need a wife. For reasons of inheritance and social obligation, I must marry before my next birthday. I have no interest in the usual games of courtship. I observed you yesterday from the window of my chamber." Clarissa's eyes widened, so she had not imagined that moment of connection. "You did not know you were being watched," he continued. "You were feeding birds from your window, scattering crumbs and speaking to them as though they were old friends. There was a gentleness in your manner that intrigued me. I made inquiries with your housekeeper about your position in this household." Heat flooded Clarissa's cheeks. What had Mrs. Holloway told him? "I learnt that you are treated as little more than a servant in your own family home," he said, and something flickered in his cold eyes. Anger, perhaps. "I also learnt that you are kind to the servants, that you share your meagre portions with the stable cat, that you tend to injured birds and help the gardener's children with their letters." Clarissa did not know what to say. She had not realized anyone noticed these small things. "I am offering you marriage, Miss Pemberton, not because I love you. I am not capable of such sentiment any longer, but because I believe you would suit my purposes. In return, you would escape this house and have a comfortable life as a duchess. You would want for nothing materially. I have only one requirement." She waited, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. His next words were measured and careful. "I haven't touched a woman in 10 years, not since my wife died. I have no intention of resuming such intimacies. Our marriage would be one of convenience only. You would have your own chambers, your own life. I would ask nothing physical from you. Do you understand what I am saying?" Clarissa stared at him. This powerful, wealthy duke was offering her freedom from her stepmother's cruelty, a life of comfort and dignity, and in return he wanted nothing but her presence as his wife. It seemed too good to be true. "Why me?" she finally asked. "You could have anyone, someone beautiful and accomplished." "I do not want beauty or accomplishments," he said flatly. "I want someone who will not expect things I cannot give. Someone who understands what it means to be lonely. I believe we could have a peaceable arrangement, Miss Pemberton. Nothing more, nothing less." She thought of her cold room, of Margaret's pitcher of water, of her stepmother's endless cruelty. Then she looked at this strange, damaged duke who was offering her escape. "Yes," she said softly, "I will marry you, Your Grace." Something crossed his face. Relief, perhaps, or maybe just satisfaction at completing a transaction. "Very well. The wedding will take place in 3 days. I shall make all arrangements. You need do nothing but appear." He turned back to the window, dismissing her. Clarissa stood on shaking legs and left the room. In the hallway, her stepmother grabbed her arm hard enough to bruise. "What did you do?" she hissed. "What tricks did you play?" "I played no tricks," Clarissa said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "His Grace has asked me to marry him. I have accepted." Her stepmother's face went purple with rage. But before she could speak, The Duke appeared in the doorway. His cold gaze swept over the scene, taking in her stepmother's grip on Clarissa's arm. "Madam," he said, his voice like frost, "you will unhand my betrothed now." Her stepmother released Clarissa immediately and stepped back. The Duke moved forward and offered Clarissa his arm. She took it, feeling the solid strength beneath the fabric of his coat. "Miss Pemberton will be returning to her room to prepare for our wedding," he announced. "She is not to be disturbed by anyone for any reason. If I learn she has been mistreated in any way before she becomes my Duchess, I will make certain this family regrets it. Am I understood?" "Yes, Your Grace," her stepmother said faintly. He escorted Clarissa up the stairs himself. When they reached her small room, he looked around with barely concealed disgust. "You have lived here?" "Yes, Your Grace." "Pack whatever you wish to keep. I shall send my own servants tomorrow with proper trunks and suitable clothing. You will never spend another night in this room." He left before she could respond. Clarissa sank onto her bed, her mind spinning. 3 days. In 3 days, she would be a duchess. She would leave this house forever. She began to pack her few possessions with trembling hands. The small painting of wild flowers, a few books, a shawl her father had given her when she was a child, her mother's locket, the only thing she had from the woman who died bringing her into this world. That night, she lay in her narrow bed and thought about the Duke's words. He had been married before. His wife had died. The pain in his voice when he spoke of not touching a woman suggested deep grief. He had loved his first wife so much that he could not bear the thought of intimacy with anyone else. Clarissa felt a strange pang in her chest. She would be his wife in name only. A companion, perhaps, but never truly his. Part of her whispered that this was better than nothing, better than this house and this life. But another part wondered what it would be like to be loved the way he had clearly loved his first wife. She pushed the thought away. She was being foolish. She was 25 years old, plain and poor. No one would ever love her that way. The Duke's offer was more than she had any right to hope for. She would accept it gratefully and make the best of this strange arrangement. The next 3 days passed in a blur. The Duke's servants arrived as promised. They brought trunks of beautiful gowns, all in soft colors that actually suited Clarissa's complexion. There were gloves and bonnets and shoes that fit perfectly. Mrs. Holloway helped her bathe and dress, tears streaming down her kind face. "You deserve this, dear girl," the housekeeper said. "You deserve every happiness." Clarissa hugged her tightly. "You have been so good to me. I shall never forget your kindness." The wedding took place in the drawing room of Thornbury Manor, the Duke's primary estate. It was a small ceremony with only a vicar and 2 witnesses. Clarissa wore a simple white gown. Her hands shook as she spoke. Her vows. The Duke's voice was steady and sure. When the vicar pronounced them husband and wife, the Duke did not kiss her. He simply nodded, as though sealing a business arrangement. Then he offered his arm and escorted her to dinner. The meal was quiet. They sat at opposite ends of a long table in a magnificent dining room. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing light across white walls. The food was delicious, but Clarissa could barely taste it. She was too aware of her new husband, of the way he watched her when he thought she was not looking. After dinner, he stood. "I shall show you to your chambers." He led her through vast hallways, lined with paintings and tapestries. Thornbury Manor was beautiful, but cold. It felt like a museum, not a home. He stopped before a set of double doors and opened them. "These are your rooms," he said. "You may decorate them however you wish. There are servants to attend to your every need. My chambers are in the opposite wing. You need never see me unless you choose to." Clarissa looked at the luxurious bedroom. It had a huge four-poster bed with silk curtains. A fire burned in the hearth. There were fresh flowers on every surface. It was more beautiful than anything she had ever seen. "Thank you, Your Grace," she said softly. "You may call me Thornbury," he said, "or Richard, if you prefer. We are married now." "Richard." She tested the name. It felt strange on her tongue. He nodded. "I bid you good night, Clarissa. Sleep well." He left, closing the door behind him. Clarissa stood alone in her beautiful chamber and felt tears begin to fall. She was not sure why she was crying. She had everything she could want: safety, comfort, freedom from cruelty. Yet she felt more alone than ever. A maid appeared to help her undress and prepare for bed. The girl was young and cheerful, chattering about how lucky Clarissa was to be the new Duchess. Clarissa smiled and nodded, but said little. When she was finally alone, she climbed into the massive bed and pulled the covers up to her chin. The sheets were silk. The mattress was soft. Everything was perfect. So why did her heart ache? She thought of Richard's words. He had not touched a woman in 10 years. He did not intend to touch her either. She was his wife, but she would never know his embrace, never feel wanted or desired. She would live in this beautiful prison just as she had lived in her stepmother's house, just a different kind of loneliness. Clarissa turned her face into the pillow and cried herself to sleep. The next morning brought sunshine streaming through tall windows. Clarissa woke to find the maid, whose name was Annie, bringing breakfast on a tray. "His Grace thought you might prefer to eat in your rooms this morning," Annie said cheerfully. "He wanted you to rest after yesterday." "That was kind of him," Clarissa said, sitting up. "Oh, His Grace is ever so kind," Annie said. "At least he is to us servants. He pays fair wages and never raises his voice, though he does keep to himself something awful. Been that way since the first Duchess died. God rest her soul." Clarissa wanted to ask more, but knew it would be improper. She ate her breakfast slowly, savoring food that was meant for her alone. When she finished, Annie helped her dress in a morning gown of soft blue. "His Grace asked if you would join him in the library at 11, Annie said. "He wishes to discuss household matters with you." Clarissa's stomach tightened with nervousness. She nodded and spent the intervening time exploring her chambers. She had a sitting room, a dressing room, and even a small study. There were books on the shelves, all new. Someone had been very thoughtful in preparing these rooms. At 11 precisely, she made her way to the library. A footman directed her, and she knocked softly before entering. The library was magnificent. Books lined every wall from floor to ceiling. Tall windows let in streams of light. Richard stood by a desk, sorting through papers. He looked up when she entered, and she saw surprise cross his face. "That color suits you," he said abruptly. "Blue. It brings out your eyes." Heat rushed to Clarissa's cheeks. "Thank you." He gestured to a chair near his desk. "Please sit. I wanted to explain how the household operates. Mrs. Winters is the housekeeper here. She will defer to you in all domestic matters. You are mistress of this house now. The servants will look to you for direction." "I have no experience managing such a large household," Clarissa admitted. "Mrs. Winters will guide you. She is very capable." He paused, then added more gently, "You need not be afraid, Clarissa. No one here will judge you, and if anyone treats you with disrespect, you need only tell me." His consideration moved her. "You are very kind." He looked uncomfortable, as though unused to such praise. "I am simply being practical. You are my Duchess. You deserve to be treated as such." They spent an hour reviewing household matters. Richard explained the various estates he owned, the income they generated, and the responsibilities that came with the title. He spoke in a measured, careful way, as though afraid of overwhelming her. Clarissa listened and asked questions when she did not understand. "You have a sharp mind," he observed at one point. "Your questions are intelligent ones." "I had little else to do in my stepmother's house but read," she said. "Your library is wonderful. Might I borrow books from it?" "Of course. Everything I have is yours now." He stood, signaling the meeting was over. "I shall be in my study most days. You are free to do as you please. Ride if you wish. The gardens are extensive. There is a music room if you play." "I do not play," Clarissa admitted. "I was never taught." Something flickered in his eyes. "Would you like to learn? I could arrange for a teacher." "I would like that very much." He nodded. "I shall see to it." As she moved toward the door, he spoke again. "Clarissa." She turned back. "I want you to be comfortable here, to be happy, if possible. If you need anything at all, you need only ask." "Thank you, Richard. You are more generous than I deserve." "You deserve far more than you have been given," he said quietly. "I hope, in time, you will come to believe that." She left the library with her heart feeling lighter than it had in years. Her new husband was remote and guarded, yes, but there was kindness in him. She had seen it in the way he spoke to her, the way he looked at her. Perhaps this strange marriage could become something like friendship. The days turned into weeks. Clarissa settled into her new life with cautious wonder. She explored the manor and its grounds. The gardens were beautiful, full of roses and lavender. There was a small pond with swans. She spent hours walking the paths, breathing in the fresh air and sunshine. Mrs. Winters proved to be a wonderful teacher. The housekeeper showed Clarissa how to manage the staff, how to plan menus and organize events. Clarissa found she enjoyed the work. It felt good to be useful, to have purpose beyond being someone's burden. She saw Richard at dinner most evenings. They ate together in the smaller family dining room rather than the grand formal one. At first, their conversations were stilted and awkward, but slowly they began to find common ground. They both loved books. They both enjoyed quiet mornings. They both felt most at peace in the gardens. One evening, about a month after their wedding, Richard asked about her childhood. Clarissa hesitated, not wanting to burden him with her sad history, but he persisted gently, and she found herself telling him about her father, about his death, and how her stepmother had changed after that. "She resented having to care for me," Clarissa said softly. "I was a reminder of my father's first wife, the woman he truly loved." "That was not your fault," Richard said, his voice rough with anger. "You were a child." "I know, but knowing does not always help." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "My wife, Elizabeth, died of a fever. It came on suddenly. She was well one day and gone within a week. I was helpless to save her." Clarissa's heart ached for him. "I am so sorry. It has been 10 years, but the guilt remains. I should have called for more doctors. Should have done something more." "You cannot control such things," Clarissa said gently. "Death comes when it will. You loved her. That is what mattered." He looked at her then, really looked at her. "You are wise beyond your years. Only because I have known loss too." They sat in silence after that, but it was a comfortable silence, a shared understanding of pain. When Richard stood to leave, he paused by her chair. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for listening." "Any time," she replied. After that evening, something shifted between them. Richard began seeking her out more often. He would find her in the library and sit nearby, reading his own book. Sometimes he would read passages aloud and ask her opinion. She discovered he had a dry wit that made her laugh. She began to look forward to seeing him, to the sound of his voice and the rare smile that transformed his stern face. She told herself it was simply gratitude. He had saved her from her stepmother. Of course she was fond of him. But late at night, alone in her bed, she admitted the truth. She was falling in love with her husband. It was a terrifying realization. He had made it clear he did not want physical intimacy. He still loved his dead wife. Clarissa was simply a convenience, a solution to his inheritance problem. If she let herself love him and he never returned that love, the pain would be unbearable. She tried to guard her heart, but Richard made it so difficult. He was thoughtful in countless small ways. He noticed when she was tired and suggested she rest. He had the cook prepare her favorite foods. He brought her books he thought she would enjoy. One afternoon, about 3 months into their marriage, Clarissa was in the garden when a sudden storm blew in. Rain began pouring down before she could reach the house. She ran for shelter, but within moments she was soaked through. She reached the conservatory and ducked inside, laughing at her own foolishness. "Clarissa?" Richard's voice came from the doorway. He saw her dripping on the floor and immediately shrugged off his coat. He draped it around her shoulders, his hands lingering for just a moment. "You will catch your death," he said, but his voice was gentle rather than scolding. "It came on so suddenly," she said. Still laughing, "I did not even see the clouds." He smiled then, a real smile that reached his eyes. "You look like a drowned kitten." "That is not the first time I have been told such a thing," she said, remembering Margaret's cruelty. His smile faded. "Who said that to you?" "It does not matter now." "It matters to me." He moved closer, his blue eyes intense. "You are not a drowned kitten, Clarissa. You are beautiful." The word hung in the air between them. Beautiful. No one had ever called her that. She stared up at him, her heart pounding. He was so close, she could feel the warmth of his body. His eyes dropped to her lips, and for a breathless moment she thought he might kiss her. But then he stepped back abruptly. "I shall have Annie bring you dry clothes." "Excuse me." He left quickly, almost fleeing. Clarissa stood there in his coat, confused and aching. He had wanted to kiss her. She was certain of it. But he had stopped himself, because he had promised not to touch her, because he was still bound to his dead wife's memory. Tears mixed with the rain on her face. She loved him. She loved him so much it hurt. And he would never be truly hers. That night, Clarissa could not sleep. She paced her room, Richard's coat still draped over a chair. She had folded it carefully, breathing in his scent. Cedar and leather and something uniquely him. She was torturing herself, and she knew it. But she could not seem to stop. Near midnight, she heard a sound in the hallway. Footsteps passing her door. She recognized Richard's tread. He was restless too. On impulse, she grabbed a shawl and opened her door. He was at the end of the hallway, heading toward the stairs. "Richard," she called softly. He turned, surprise clear on his face. "Clarissa, is something wrong?" "I could not sleep. I heard you walking." He hesitated, then said, "I often walk at night. Old habit. May I walk with you?" He looked like he might refuse. Then he nodded. "If you wish." They walked through the quiet house together. Moonlight streamed through windows, casting silver shadows. Neither spoke for a long time. Finally, Richard led her to a portrait gallery she had not yet explored. "This is Elizabeth," he said, stopping before a painting. Clarissa looked at the woman in the frame. She was beautiful, with golden hair and a sweet smile, young and vibrant, Everything Clarissa was not. She was lovely, Clarissa said softly. She was kind, Richard said. Gentle. She never said a harsh word to anyone. You must miss her terribly. I did. For years I thought I would never stop missing her. He paused, then turned to look at Clarissa. But lately I have found myself thinking of her less, and I do not know how to feel about that. Clarissa's breath caught. Why do you think that is? He studied her face in the moonlight. You know why? The air between them felt charged, dangerous. Clarissa knew she should step back, protect herself, but she could not move. In the conservatory today, he said quietly, I wanted to kiss you. It was the first time I have wanted to touch anyone since Elizabeth died. It frightened me. Why? Clarissa whispered. Because I made you a promise. I said I would not touch you. I brought you here under those terms. It would be wrong to change them now. What if I wanted you to change them? The words escaped before she could stop them. Richard's eyes widened. Clarissa, I know I am not beautiful like she was, Clarissa said in a rush. I know I am plain and awkward, but I care for you, Richard, more than I should, more than is wise. If you can never return such feelings, I understand, but please do not push me away because of a promise I never wanted. He stared at her, and she saw a war playing out on his face. Desire fought with duty. Hope struggled against guilt. Finally, he reached out and touched her cheek with trembling fingers. You are not plain, he said hoarsely. You are lovely in ways Elizabeth never was. You are strong, brave. You have survived cruelty that would have broken most people. And somehow you remain kind. That is beauty, Clarissa. True beauty. Tears spilled down her cheeks. He wiped them away with his thumb, his touch infinitely gentle. Then, slowly, giving her time to pull away, he lowered his head and kissed her. It was soft and sweet and perfect. His lips were warm against hers. His hand cradled her face like she was precious. Clarissa felt her heart expand with joy so intense, it was almost painful. This was what she had dreamed of, what she had thought impossible. When he pulled back, they were both breathing hard. He rested his forehead against hers. I have been fighting this for weeks, he admitted, trying to convince myself it was wrong. But I cannot fight it anymore. I care for you, Clarissa. Deeply. I care for you too, she whispered. He kissed her again, longer this time. His arms came around her, pulling her close. Clarissa melted into his embrace, finally feeling truly safe, truly wanted. When they finally broke apart, he was smiling. Come, he said, taking her hand. Let me show you something. He led her through more hallways to his wing of the house. She had never been here before. He opened a door to reveal a sitting room that connected two bedrooms. One door was closed, the other stood open. My chambers, he said, gesturing to the open door. And that was Elizabeth's room. I kept it closed after she died. Could not bear to go in. But tonight, I think I need to. He opened the door. The room was dusty but beautiful, frozen in time. Clarissa followed him inside. He walked to a small writing desk and opened a drawer. He pulled out a letter and handed it to her. Elizabeth wrote this before she died. She knew she was fading. I could never bring myself to read it. Will you read it to me? Clarissa unfolded the letter with shaking hands. The handwriting was delicate and looping. She began to read aloud. My dearest Richard, if you are reading this, I am gone. I am so sorry to leave you, but I must speak plainly because there is no time left for anything else. You loved me well and truly. I have been blessed to know such love, but I do not want you to spend your life mourning me. Promise me you will live again. Love again. Find someone who makes you laugh, someone who challenges you, someone who sees the good man beneath your stern exterior. Do not hold yourself prisoner to my memory. I want you to be happy. My love, that is my final wish. Be happy. All my love, Elizabeth. Clarissa's voice broke on the last words. Richard stood very still, tears streaming down his face. Then he turned to Clarissa and pulled her into his arms. She gave me permission, he said, his voice choked. All this time I thought loving someone else would betray her, but she wanted me to move on. She loved you, Clarissa said. She wanted you to be happy. I am happy, he said, pulling back to look at her. With you, you make me happy, Clarissa. You make me feel alive again. She smiled through her tears. You make me happy too. You have given me everything I never dared to dream of. A home, kindness, and now this. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. I want to do this properly, he said. Court you as you deserve, take you to London, show you off to society. Let everyone see how remarkable you are. I do not need society, she said. I only need you. You shall have me, he promised. For as long as I live, I am yours, Clarissa, completely. They stood together in Elizabeth's old room, holding each other as the moon set outside the windows. Clarissa felt a sense of peace she had never known. She was home, finally, truly home. The next few weeks were like a dream. Richard courted her properly, as he had promised. They rode together through the countryside. They had picnics by the pond. He taught her to waltz in the ballroom, holding her close as they moved to music only they could hear. He also began breaking down the last walls between them. He told her about his childhood, his struggles with his father's expectations. She told him about her mother, the woman she had never known but always wondered about. They shared their fears and hopes and dreams. The servants noticed the change in their master. He smiled more, laughed more. The cold, remote Duke was transforming into someone warm and engaged. Mrs. Winters told Clarissa that the entire household was thrilled. You have worked a miracle, Your Grace, the housekeeper said. His Grace is himself again, better than himself. But not everyone was happy about the changes at Thornbury Manor. One afternoon, a carriage arrived unannounced. Clarissa was in the garden when she heard the commotion. She hurried inside to find her stepmother standing in the entrance hall. So this is where you have been hiding, Lady Pemberton said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Your dear sisters and I have been ever so worried about you. Margaret and Felicity stood behind their mother, looking around the manor with obvious envy. Clarissa's happiness evaporated, replaced by cold dread. What are you doing here? She asked. Is that any way to greet your family? Her stepmother said. We have come to pay a visit. Surely the Duchess can spare a few days for her poor relations. Before Clarissa could respond, Richard appeared. He took in the scene with one glance. His face became a mask of cold fury. Lady Pemberton, he said icily, you are not invited. Surely you do not begrudge a mother visiting her beloved daughter, Lady Pemberton said. She is not your daughter. She is my wife, and you are not welcome in this house. Lady Pemberton's false smile slipped. Your Grace, I believe you misunderstand. Clarissa has always been prone to exaggeration. If she has told you lies about our relationship, she has told me nothing but truth. Richard cut her off. I know exactly how you treated her, how you abused and humiliated her for years. You are fortunate I do not have you arrested for your cruelty. Margaret stepped forward. Your Grace, please, we are family. Clarissa may have been difficult, but we tried our best. "Do not dare," Richard said, his voice like steel. "I have investigated your household. I know about the beatings, the starvation, the degradation. You treated her worse than a scullery maid. If I ever hear that you have spoken ill of my wife or attempted to contact her again, I will use every ounce of my power to destroy you. Your family will be ruined socially and financially. Am I clear?" Lady Pemberton's face went white. She had never been spoken to this way. No one had ever dared. But Richard was a duke. He could destroy them with a word. "Perfectly clear, Your Grace," she said stiffly. "Good. Now leave. You have 5 minutes to get off my property." They left quickly, scrambling into their carriage with as much dignity as they could muster. Richard watched until they disappeared down the drive. Then he turned to Clarissa, his expression softening. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. She nodded, but she was shaking. He pulled her into his arms, and she clung to him. "I was so afraid," she whispered. "Afraid they would take me back somehow." "Never," he said fiercely. "You are mine, Clarissa. Mine to protect and cherish. No one will ever hurt you again." She believed him. In his arms, she felt safe from the world, from her past, from everything that had ever hurt her. That night, Richard asked if she would move her things to his wing of the manor. "I want you close," he said. "I want to fall asleep, knowing you are near. If you are willing." She was more than willing. Over the next few days, her belongings were moved to the chambers adjacent to his. They now shared the sitting room that had once separated his room from Elizabeth's. Clarissa redecorated Elizabeth's old room, making it her own while respecting what it had been. Richard spent every evening with her now. They would sit together by the fire, reading or talking. Sometimes they simply sat in comfortable silence, and every night he would kiss her good-night at her door, his embrace growing longer each time. One evening, about 5 months into their marriage, he knocked on her door after their usual good-night kiss. She opened it, surprised. "May I come in?" he asked, and there was something vulnerable in his voice. "Of course." He entered her chamber and closed the door behind him. He looked nervous, which was unlike him. "Clarissa, I have been patient. I have tried to give you time. But I find I can no longer sleep for thinking of you, for wanting you near." Her heart began to race. "What are you saying?" "I am saying I want this to be a real marriage. In every way, if you are willing, if you want me as I want you." She crossed the room and took his hands. "I have wanted that since the conservatory, since you first kissed me. I love you, Richard. I have loved you for months." His face transformed with joy. "I love you too. God, I love you so much it terrifies me. I thought I could never feel this way again, but you brought me back to life, Clarissa. You made me whole." He kissed her then, deeply and passionately. She responded with all the love and longing she had been holding back. He lifted her in his arms and carried her to the bed, laying her down gently. "Are you certain?" he asked one more time. "I have never been more certain of anything," she replied. That night, they became husband and wife in truth. Richard was gentle and patient, teaching her the ways of love. Clarissa felt cherished in a way she had never imagined possible. Afterward, they lay tangled together, and she rested her head on his chest. "I never want to sleep apart from you again," he murmured. "Then do not," she said simply. From that night on, they shared his bed. Clarissa woke each morning in his arms, feeling loved and treasured. The cold, lonely Duke had become the warmest, most devoted husband, and the broken, unwanted girl had become a confident, beloved Duchess. But their happiness was threatened one more time. About a month later, a letter arrived for Richard. Clarissa was with him in his study when he opened it. She watched his face darken as he read. "What is it?" she asked. "My cousin, Lord Blackwood. He is challenging the validity of our marriage. He claims I married you under duress or temporarily insanity. If he succeeds, he would inherit my title." Clarissa felt ice in her veins. "Can he do that?" "He can try. It will require a court case. We will have to go to London, face the gossips and scandal-mongers. It will not be pleasant." "Will we lose?" she asked quietly. He came around the desk and knelt before her chair. "No, because our marriage is legal and binding, and because I will fight for you with everything I have. You are my wife, my love. Nothing and no one will take you from me." She believed him, but she was still afraid. They traveled to London the next week. The city was intimidating, full of people who stared and whispered. Clarissa had never been part of high society. She felt out of place and awkward, but Richard never left her side. He introduced her to everyone as his beloved wife. He danced with her at balls, ignoring the whispers. He showed her off proudly, making it clear he adored her. The court case was brutal. Lord Blackwood's lawyers attacked Clarissa's character. They called her a fortune hunter. They implied she had tricked Richard. They brought her stepmother to testify that Clarissa had always been manipulative and cunning. Clarissa sat in the courtroom, listening to the lies, feeling her old insecurities return. Was she good enough for Richard? Did she deserve this life? Maybe they were right. Maybe she was nothing. Then Richard took the stand, and he spoke with such passion and conviction that the entire courtroom fell silent. "I married Clarissa Pemberton because I recognized in her a kindness and strength I had never seen before," he said clearly. "She has asked nothing of me, given everything to me. She has made me a better man, a happier man, and I will not stand here and listen to anyone slander her. She is worth 1,000 of her critics. She is worth everything to me." He looked directly at her as he spoke, and Clarissa felt her fears melt away. It did not matter what anyone else thought. Richard loved her. That was all that mattered. The judge ruled in their favor. The marriage was declared valid. Lord Blackwood slunk away in defeat, and Richard and Clarissa walked out of the courthouse hand in hand, facing the world together. That night, there was a celebration ball in their honor. Clarissa wore a gown of deep blue, the color Richard said brought out her eyes. She walked into the ballroom on his arm, her head held high. People stared. But this time it was with admiration rather than contempt. The Duke of Thornbury and his Duchess were the talk of London. Their love story had captured everyone's imagination. The cold Duke, who had been brought back to life by a gentle, kind woman. It was the stuff of fairy tales. Richard led her onto the dance floor. As they waltzed, he smiled down at her. "Are you happy?" he asked. "I am happier than I ever thought possible," she replied honestly. "Good, because I intend to spend the rest of my life making you happier still." They danced until dawn, lost in each other, and when they finally returned to Thornbury Manor, it felt like coming home. The cold, empty house had become warm and full of life, full of love. Over the next year, Clarissa transformed the manor completely. She opened rooms that had been closed. She filled the halls with light and flowers. She befriended the servants and turned them into a real family. And she loved Richard with all her heart. He loved her just as fiercely. He showered her with gifts and affection. He supported her when she started a school for poor children on the estate. He held her when she cried from happiness, and he told her every single day that she was beautiful and loved and cherished. One spring morning, Clarissa woke feeling ill. Annie helped her dress and suggested calling for a doctor. Clarissa agreed, puzzled by her unusual quizziness. The doctor came that afternoon and examined her. Then he smiled. "Congratulations, Your Grace. You are with child." Clarissa stared at him in shock. A baby. She was going to have a baby. Richard's baby. When she told him that evening, he actually cried. He fell to his knees and pressed his face against her still flat stomach. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for giving me everything. A home, a family, a reason to live." "You gave me the same," she said, running her fingers through his hair. "You saved me, Richard. In every way a person can be saved." Their son was born that winter. They named him Thomas after Clarissa's father. Richard was besotted from the first moment he held his son. He spent hours in the nursery, just watching the baby sleep, and Clarissa watched her husband and marveled at how far they had both come. From two broken people, they had built something beautiful, a marriage based on respect and friendship, and deep, abiding love. It had not been easy. They had both carried scars from their pasts, but they had healed each other. Years later, when Thomas was old enough to understand, Clarissa told him their story. She told him about the cold water on her face and the small room at the back of the manor, about the Duke who had said he would never touch a woman again, and about how love had found them both when they least expected it. "So you see," she said, smoothing his dark hair, "even when things seem darkest, hope can find you. Love can find you. You just have to be brave enough to accept it." Thomas hugged her tightly. Behind them, Richard stood in the doorway, watching his family with a smile. Clarissa met his eyes and smiled back. They had given each other the one thing neither had ever expected to have: a home, a family, a love that conquered all, and they lived happily ever after.